Most kids my age were still snoring when I was hauling lumber at dawn. My name's Ethan Ward, and by 17 I was already working full-time with my dad, a contractor out on the edges of Denver, Colorado. My mornings began before sunrise, the kind of cold, still dark, that seeps into your bones before you even step outside. Dad used to joke, "Ethan, you can't sleep through life and expect to survive in this business." And I'd always mutter, half awake, "I'll survive just fine, Dad, don't worry." He'd grin into his coffee and say, "That's what they all say," right before they forget to tie down the load. I grew up on job sites, the smell of sawdust, diesel, sweat, and the faint tang of rust on old nails. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. My dad, Jack Ward, was a good man, firm but fair, and Mom worked nights at a local clinic, so most mornings, it was just us in the truck. That October in 2018, the air had turned sharp, the first bite of winter creeping in. We had a big renovation project out near a decommissioned industrial site called Black Ridge. 2 hours from town, the place had been half abandoned since the mid-2000s, when a repair company went bankrupt mid-project. On October 14th, Dad woke me before 3 a.m. "Delivery run," he said. "Need you to drop some insulation and piping before the crew shows up." "Why me?" I groaned. "Because you're the one who said you wanted responsibility," he answered, sliding a thermos across the counter. "And because I pulled a 16-hour shift yesterday." Fair enough. I grabbed my hoodie, keys, and that thermos, still steaming. The highway was empty, just the hum of the tires and the radio's static. The further I drove, the darker it got. No lights, no towns, just pines and endless dirt roads. I told myself it was just another delivery. But something about that night, the silence felt heavier, like the world was holding its breath. When I reached Black Ridge, the sky was still pitch black. My headlights swept over a row of broken trailers and rusted scaffolding. The place looked dead. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. Then I saw it. A truck was already there, parked crooked near the main warehouse. Lights off. Engine dead. The windows were tinted too dark to see through. I slowed to a crawl, rolled down my window and called out, "Hey, anyone here?" Nothing. Just the echo of my own voice. Probably a night guard, I told myself, even though no guard was ever assigned this early. I parked, started unloading the insulation rolls and piping. The air had this odd electric stillness to it. Not quiet, just watching. My breath fogged the air like smoke. After about an hour, I climbed into the cab, ready to head home. I turned the key, engine rumbling. That's when the stranger's truck came alive. Headlights blazed on, bright, sudden, blinding. My stomach dropped. The truck accelerated, tires spinning gravel, and before I could react, it cut across the road, blocking me in. "What the hell?" I shouted, slamming the brakes. I threw it in reverse, tires squealing, heart pounding, but the other driver kept edging closer. Then came the first hit. Bam! Metal crunching against metal. My body jolted forward. I froze. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I barely heard the door creak open from that other truck before a voice cut through the dark. "You shouldn't be here, kid. Don't make this harder." It was calm, too calm. I recognized that voice. Samuel Kaine, a worker my dad once hired, a guy who'd vanished after stealing thousands in tools and cash from job sites. The cops never found him. Now he was here. My instincts screamed, "Run." Dad's voice echoed in my head. "If something feels off, it's off. Don't fight. Get out alive." So I slammed the truck in reverse, twisted the wheel hard, and tore down a side path. Gravel sprayed like shrapnel. But somehow Samuel's truck was there again, like it knew where I'd go. My heart thudded so loud I couldn't hear the engine. I gunned it through weeds and mud, headlights slicing through fog. Every second, I expected another impact. Then, up ahead, a light. Someone with a headlamp. "Ethan, you okay?" a voice yelled. It was Marcus, one of Dad's crew leads, arriving early. I hit the horn and Samuel's truck without hesitation, killed its lights, reversed, and disappeared into the trees. No taillights, no sound, just gone. Marcus jogged over, flashlight sweeping my crumpled fender. Jesus, what happened? I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. Truck, someone tried to run me off. Samuel Kaine, I swear it was him. Marcus's face went pale. Kaine? You serious? Dead serious. We searched the site. Nothing. No tire tracks, no footprints, just the echo of the wind through metal beams. When we got back to town, Dad was waiting on the porch. You okay? He asked, his voice half fury, half relief. Yeah, I lied. Just a scare. He narrowed his eyes. A scare doesn't wreck a fender. I told him everything. His jaw clenched tighter with each word. I told you to wait for daylight. That man's bad news. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me flinch. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to move on. Police took a report, but without evidence, it went nowhere. They said, probably a drifter. You're lucky. Lucky. Sure. A month later, I started noticing small things. A car idling too long across the street, locks clicking outside my window around midnight, strange texts from unknown numbers. One read, "You make early deliveries again, you'll regret it." Dad told me to ignore it. Could be pranksters. Keep your head down. But I knew better. Samuel wasn't done. One morning, I found a construction glove hanging off my truck mirror, the same brand Samuel always wore. Inside was a note, "Stay out of my sights." I started taking different routes, never leaving before dawn. Still, that feeling of being watched clung to me. Eventually, I quit the company. Dad understood, even if it broke him a little. "You're my son before you're my employee," he said, gripping my shoulder. By winter, the police closed the case. No further sightings, they said. But for me, it never ended. It's been 7 years. I'm 24 now, working as a safety inspector in Denver. I still wake before sunrise, but I don't drive dark country roads anymore. Sometimes, though, when fog settles low and the headlights cut through it just right, I see that truck in my memory. Silent. Waiting. I tell myself Samuel's dead, that he's long gone. But sometimes, I see a pickup idling near a site, and my hands start to tremble all over again. Fear's a strange thing. It doesn't fade. It adapts. It hides behind logic and age and experience, but it never leaves. Every now and then I still get those texts. New numbers. Same tone. Still working nights? Or, I see you got a new truck. I change numbers, block them, report them, but the feeling never changes. That October night taught me something my father never could. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about listening to your gut, even when it makes no sense, and some people, some ghosts, never really disappear. They just find new roads to haunt. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Fear isn't weakness. It's a warning, one that can save your life. The world's full of people who smile while planning harm, and the line between safety and danger can be as thin as a dark, empty road before sunrise. Always listen to that inner voice. It might be the only thing standing between you and the unknown. When I was 16, I thought I understood the world. I believed responsibility was just a matter of showing up on time and following the rules. That summer, 2014, Portland was warm and green, the kind of place where you could almost forget bad things existed. My parents said a job would help me grow up. My mom found the ad for a photography assistant posted at the library. Evelyn Harrow's photography studio, out on the edge of town. The studio wasn't what I expected. It was an old Victorian house, the kind with stained glass windows and overgrown hydrangeas, perched on a quiet hill like something out of an antique postcard. Evelyn herself was unlike anyone I'd ever met. Tall, severe, with silver hair tied in a perfect bun and a rosary around her wrist. She wore long skirts even in the heat and talked about the light as if it were alive. "You capture the soul, not the face," she said during my interview. "Photography is a spiritual act." At 16, I just nodded and smiled. I didn't believe in souls. I believed in shutter speeds and color correction. Still, I liked the job. I sorted prints, cleaned lenses, helped with lighting, and sometimes followed Evelyn to horse shows. The work was quiet, simple, and strangely satisfying. My parents didn't love the long hours, though. Mom worried constantly, calling every night at 9 sharp. "Clara, don't stay late again," she'd warn. "You're just a kid." Dad would chuckle. "She's responsible, Sue. Let her learn." Their small arguments became a kind of background noise that summer, like the hum of the old ceiling fan in my room. My brother Luke thought the whole thing was hilarious. "How's Demon Lady?" he'd ask over dinner. "Wrangling any evil spirits?" He called me Evil Wrangler for months. At first I thought the jokes were funny too. I had no idea how close they'd come to the truth. Evelyn's son, Nate Harrows, came back in mid-July. She told me he'd been in the Navy. "He's a good man," she said. "A man of faith." When I met him, I almost believed her. Nate was tall and clean-cut, with that easy confidence military guys seem to carry. He thanked me for helping his mother and offered to fix the studio's broken back door. For a while, he was polite, funny even. He asked about my classes, my family, what kind of photos I liked. But slowly, something shifted. His questions got personal, too personal. "Why do your parents let you work so late?" he'd ask. Or, "You ever feel like someone's watching over you?" Once he asked if I prayed. I said I didn't. He frowned like I'd told him I kicked puppies for fun. "You should be careful saying things like that," he said quietly. "There are forces that notice unbelievers." I laughed it off, thinking it was another one of Evelyn's superstitions rubbing off on him. But his tone wasn't teasing. After that, I caught him staring sometimes, through the window while I adjusted lighting, or in the reflection of the camera lens. When I'd catch him, he'd smile too slowly, like he didn't quite remember how. One afternoon, I overheard him and Evelyn whispering in the next room. Her voice trembled. "She doesn't believe, Nate. That's the danger. That's how they get in." I froze, pretending to clean equipment. Nate's answer came low and deliberate. "Then maybe it's our duty to stop it." I should have quit that day. I should have told my parents everything. But I was 16, proud and scared of looking foolish. So I stayed, hoping it was just talk. The days blurred into uneasy silence. Evelyn grew colder, her eyes tracking me as I worked. Nate hovered constantly, offering to drive me home, asking to talk about salvation. When I told him I wasn't interested, his voice shook. "You don't understand. You're dangerous, Clara. You can't walk around spreading doubt." "Spreading doubt?" I said, half laughing. "I just said I don't believe in God. That's not contagious." He leaned closer, his breath sharp with coffee. "You don't know what's inside you." I pushed past him, pretending I wasn't scared. That night, I deleted my social media accounts. The next morning, a new one appeared, with my name, my photos, and Bible verses in the captions. I knew who'd done it. When I confronted Evelyn, she only said, "Nate is trying to save you." 2 days later, I caught a glimpse of him outside my house, his truck idling at the curb while I brought in groceries. I called the police, but they couldn't do much. "He hasn't made a threat," they said. "If he comes on your property, call us again." That Thursday, I stayed home alone. Rain hammered the roof while I sorted photos for a client. Around 9, a soft knock echoed through the house. My heart stopped. Then came the sound of boots, heavy, deliberate, crossing the wooden floor. I grabbed my phone, whispering to the dispatcher as I ran for the basement. My hands shook so hard I could barely turn the lock. Then, silence. Minutes passed like hours. I heard faint breathing through the door, then scratching. My body froze. Every sound became unbearable. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the pipes. Then, as suddenly as it started, it was over. When I finally crept upstairs, the front door stood open. Rain blew across the floor. He was gone. The police found boot prints near the porch, Nate's size, they said, but nothing more. He'd disappeared. Evelyn wouldn't answer calls. Within a week, the studio was shuttered. For sale hammered into the yard. I quit, obviously. My parents wanted to move. We didn't, but I changed schools, stopped posting online, and kept my curtains closed for years. At night, I'd replay the sound of those boots. Sometimes, I thought I heard them again. One step, then another, down some hallway that shouldn't exist. For a while, I thought I'd imagined everything. Then, a month later, a package arrived. An envelope with no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid of me, sitting in the studio, laughing. On the back, "You looked happy then." The police couldn't trace it. My mom cried for a week. Time dulled the fear, but it never erased it. I went to college out of state, changed my last name on social media, lived like someone learning to stay small. Every noise made me flinch. Every knock sent my pulse racing. And Nate? He vanished like smoke. No record, no sightings. Evelyn reportedly moved to Montana. Maybe she's still muttering about sin and demons somewhere. Sometimes I wonder if he's dead. Other times I'm sure he isn't. It's been 10 years. I'm 26 now, living in a quiet apartment outside Seattle. I photograph weddings and landscapes, and most days I feel normal. But when night falls, and the wind rattles the windows, the old fear wakes up. Sometimes I hear a knock. Soft, familiar, deliberate. My heart stops until I remind myself, it's probably just a neighbor. But part of me will always listen differently. Last month, a new client called for a headshot session. The voice was calm, polite. "You came highly recommended," he said. "You used to work with Evelyn Harrow, right?" My breath caught. "A long time ago," I said. "I thought so," the man replied. "She always said you had a good eye for the truth." The line went dead before I could respond. That night I slept with the lights on. It's strange, the things that never fade. People tell you trauma softens with time, that you move on. But moving on feels like walking away from a shadow that never stops following. Maybe he's gone, maybe not. But every time I hear that soft knock, I know one thing for sure. You can escape a place, not a memory. Evil doesn't always wear horns or haunt old houses. It can speak gently, smile politely, and call itself righteous. The lesson I learned is simple. When someone insists they know what's best for your soul, protect your sanity first. Trust your instincts, speak up early, and never ignore the quiet sound of danger. Summer nights in Sacramento have this strange stillness to them, the kind that makes even the crickets sound distant. That night, June 21st, 2019, I left my friend Eli's house a little before midnight. We'd been cramming for a college math exam, fueled by pizza and too much caffeine. I wasn't supposed to stay that late, but time got away from us. I remember calling my mom as I got in the car. "Hey, I'm heading home." Her voice was warm but tired. "It's late, Dylan. Be careful. And don't forget to lock the doors when you get in." "I will, love you." "You too, sweetheart." Those were the last normal words I'd hear for a long time. I drove through quiet suburban streets, the kind with half-lit porches and sprinklers hissing on automatic timers. Everything felt safe, ordinary, until I noticed the car behind me. Dark sedan, maybe a Chevy. At first I didn't think much of it. Late-night drivers were common. But after 3 turns and a few miles, it was still there. Every time I slowed, so did it. When I changed lanes, it followed. Unease crept up my neck. I muttered, "Okay, buddy, take your turn anytime now." but the car stayed glued to my bumper. The red glow of my taillights reflected off its windshield, too close, too deliberate. At a red light, I glanced at the rearview mirror. That's when I saw it. The driver wore a clown mask. The kind with a smeared white face, blue triangles under the eyes, and a blood-red nose. The mouth was stretched into an exaggerated grin that caught the faint light and glistened like wet paint. For a moment, I froze. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "What the hell?" I whispered. The light turned green and I accelerated hard, my heart pounding. The car followed. I called Eli, voice shaking. "Dude, someone's following me. I'm serious. It's a guy in a clown mask." Eli laughed, half asleep. "You're kidding, right?" "I'm not. He's been on my tail since I left your place. Maybe it's just someone messing around." "This isn't funny, man. He's matching every turn." I turned down side streets, looped through neighborhoods, even took a detour by the gas station. But every time the same headlights appeared behind me. My mouth went dry. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the car. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, my knuckles were white from gripping the wheel. I parked fast, engine still running, ready to bolt inside. The clown car followed me in, parking 2 spaces away. That was when I realized this wasn't random. I sprinted toward my building, fumbling for my keys. The automatic door beeped open and I stumbled into the lobby, breathing hard. The night clerk, a guy named Raymond, looked up from his phone. "Whoa, man, you okay?" There's someone outside, in a clown mask. He followed me here." Raymond blinked. "You serious?" "Call security, please." He picked up the phone slowly, like he didn't quite believe me. All right, chill. I'll radio them." I pressed my back to the lobby wall and peered out through the glass doors. The parking lot lights flickered slightly in the heat. Then I saw him, the clown, standing next to my car, perfectly still, just watching. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't move. The clown tilted his head slightly, like studying me. The grin looked wider now, distorted by the glass. I whispered, "He's here. He's looking right at me." Raymond frowned, stepping closer to the window. "Holy!" He jumped back. "Okay, yeah, that's messed up." He grabbed his walkie and barked into it. "Security to Building B now." The clown began, walking toward the entrance. Slow, steady, confident. The air in the lobby turned cold. Raymond muttered, "Lock the doors. Lock the damn doors." I ran to the security panel and hit the lock button just as the clown reached the glass. He stopped inches away, the mask pressed against the door. His breath fogged the glass. Then came the sound, a soft tapping, rhythmic, like knuckles rapping to a tune only he could hear. Tap, tap, tap. He stayed like that for almost a minute. Then he lifted a gloved finger and traced a small heart on the fogged surface, before turning and walking away into the dark. Security arrived minutes later, but by then, the lot was empty. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of pipes, made me flinch. I kept staring at the blinds, half expecting a painted face to appear. The next day, the police came. They took my statement, asked questions, and left with the usual, "We'll look into it." But deep down, I knew what that meant. Nothing. For a week, things were quiet. I convinced myself it was over, maybe a prank or some bored psycho, until the following Friday night. I got home from work around 10:30 p.m. As I parked, I saw a more red balloon tied to the handle of my car door. My chest tightened. I looked around. Empty street. No movement, no sound. The balloon bobbed gently in the breeze, the string creaking against metal. Attached was a note. "You looked scared. Let's play again." I dropped the note like it burned. My first instinct was to run upstairs and lock everything. I called the cops again, but all they did was file another report. Over the next week, I caught glimpses, flashes of that mask reflected in windows, a car idling across the street, sometimes even a faint laugh drifting up from the parking lot. My parents begged me to move back home. Mom cried over the phone. "Dylan, please, this isn't safe." "I can't just run away," I said, though I wanted to. "If I leave, he wins." Dad was firm. "Don't be stupid. You're being hunted." They were right. One night, as I took out the trash, I saw movement behind the dumpsters. A figure crouched low. I backed away, heart pounding, whispering, "Please, no." Then the mask glinted under the light. That same grotesque grin. I bolted upstairs, slammed my door, and called 911 again. By the time officers arrived, the parking lot was empty once more. They told me, "We'll increase patrols." But nothing changed. 2 weeks later, I was home alone. Eli had stopped coming over, claiming he didn't want to be part of whatever this was. I couldn't blame him. I'd stopped sleeping, started leaving lights on. The police visits had become routine. That night it was 11:45 p.m. again, the same time it all began. I was microwaving leftovers when I heard it. Knock, 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 3 deliberate taps on my apartment door. I froze. No one knocked that late. I whispered, "Who is it?" Silence. Then, from the peephole, I saw the distorted, smiling clown mask. Inches away. I stumbled backward, breath caught in my throat. The knocks grew louder, faster. "Go away," I shouted. Then came a low laugh, muffled but unmistakable. I could hear the sound of his breathing through the door. I grabbed the kitchen knife, shaking so hard it slipped in my grip. My phone trembled as I dialed 911. "He's here. He's outside my apartment." Dispatch tried to calm me, but I could barely speak. Please hurry." The knocking stopped. Then silence. 5 minutes later, sirens wailed outside. Officers searched the building. Nothing. No sign of anyone. But when they checked the door, they found something etched into the wood. A single word. Soon. A month later, I moved back in with my parents. The clown never returned, not that I saw anyway. But every so often I caught a car with similar headlights lingering behind me, or a faint laugh on an empty street, and my chest tightened. I never felt normal again. I'd see a balloon and freeze. The sound of a tapping finger could send me spiraling. A year later, I read an article. Masked stalker haunts suburbs. Multiple reports of clown sightings. No suspects identified. The police never caught him. Maybe they never even tried. Sometimes I think he chose me because I looked easy, alone, predictable, young. Sometimes I think it was random. Either way, he changed me. I don't drive late anymore. I don't study past dark. And every night before bed I still check the blinds, twice. Because I've learned that evil doesn't always live in haunted houses or distant woods. Sometimes, it parks behind you at a red light and smiles while you pretend you don't see. Fear is the most powerful warning we have, and the most dangerous to ignore. When your instincts scream that something's wrong, don't reason it away. Don't minimize it. The world doesn't always make sense, and some people wear masks not for laughter but for harm. Trust your gut, stay aware, and remember, real monsters don't hide under beds. They wait in the places you think are safe. I was 16 that August, halfway between childhood and independence, when my parents decided we all needed a little escape from the chaos of 2020. We drove 8 hours from Omaha to a Midwestern city I'd never been to, half steel, half quiet. The hotel stood tall and glassy, reflecting the gray sky. My mom said it looked safe and decent. I believed her. From the start, I wanted space. I'd spent months cooped up at home during lockdown, desperate for freedom. "I'm just grabbing coffee," I told Mom that first morning, wandering down to the lobby in my denim jacket and messy bun. She smiled like she didn't quite trust me. That's when I first noticed him. He was maybe in his late 50s, sharp suit, clean haircut, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom. But he wasn't reading or working. He was staring, right at me. His eyes didn't move when I looked up from my phone. They just stayed locked, patient, calculating. I told myself I was imagining things. I even smiled awkwardly, pretending not to notice. But when he appeared again later that evening, standing near the bar in the lobby while my parents checked dinner reservations, that same stillness in his posture made my stomach twist. He didn't say a word, just watched. That night after dinner, I took the elevator alone. My parents were still talking with the concierge about sightseeing plans, and I wanted to crash early. I remember checking my reflection in the mirrored walls, my face pale from the hotel's lighting. The doors started to close, until a hand slipped in. It was him, the same man from the lobby. My throat tightened. He stepped inside, calm, silent, and pressed. No floor button. Could you hit 17? I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't move, just looked at me through the reflection. Sir? He smiled, the corners of his mouth sharp. You don't want to go there, he murmured. My heart began to pound. I pressed the button myself, but the elevator didn't move. The panel flickered for a second, like he had some control over it. The air felt too close. I could smell cologne, faint and chemical. Do you work here? I stammered. He leaned slightly toward me, voice low. I know where you're staying, Sophie. That did it. I slammed my backpack into his shoulder and hit the emergency stop. The doors jerked open between floors, just enough. I squeezed through the gap, scraping my arm, bolting into the hallway like the floor was on fire. I didn't look back. When I reached my room, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely swipe the keycard. I called my dad immediately. Someone followed me. He was in the elevator, I said, words tumbling out in panic. My dad's voice came through loud and steady. Stay in the room. I'm coming up now. Minutes later, a knock came on the door. Miss Lane, room service. My stomach dropped. I hadn't ordered anything. Through the peephole, I saw him again, this time wearing a hotel bathrobe, his eyes cold and flat. He whispered something I couldn't hear, a grin pulling at his mouth. I froze. Then I called my dad again, whispering, He's here. He's right outside. The next thing I remember was my father's footsteps pounding down the hall, his shout, Hey, get away from that door, and the man's startled retreat. Security arrived within minutes. They caught him near the stairwell, pretending to be a guest. His ID didn't match any room. The police took him away while I sat on the bed, wrapped in my mom's arms, shaking uncontrollably. We stayed only one more night. The hotel offered free meals, apologies, and words that sounded rehearsed. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. The hum of the air conditioner, the click of the elevator, footsteps outside the door. Back home, things didn't feel normal again. I couldn't take elevators without panicking. I checked locks twice, sometimes 3 times. I avoided looking at strangers too long, afraid of eye contact, afraid of recognition. Therapy helped eventually. Talking helped. My parents tried not to hover, but they did. My dad still tenses when I travel alone. Mom keeps saying, You did everything right, honey. You trusted your gut. Still, that man's voice lives somewhere in my head. The stillness, the control, the way he said my name like he already owned it. 2 years later, at 18, I returned to that same city for a college visit. The hotel was still there, same name, same street. I stood across the road for a long time, watching people come and go through the glass doors. My pulse raced. I thought about the elevator, the sound of his shoes on the marble floor. I thought about the fear that had shaped every moment after. But this time I wasn't 16. I wasn't frozen. I walked inside, not to stay, just to see. The lobby looked smaller than I remembered. The mirrors didn't scare me anymore. I ordered coffee, sat near the window, and for the first time, no one was watching. That night, back at my dorm, I texted my mom. Went by the old hotel today. I'm okay. She sent back a heart emoji and the words, Proud of you, Soph. And for once, I believed her. Trust your instincts. Always. Sophie's story isn't just about fear. It's about intuition, courage and survival. Evil often hides behind politeness or familiarity, but your gut knows when something's wrong. Speaking up, fighting back, or simply getting out can save your life. In a world that sometimes dismisses young people's fears as overreactions, believing yourself is the most powerful act of all. It was December 2021, just after the holiday dinner with my family, and I was driving home through Iowa. I'd opted to drive instead of fly this year. Tickets were sky high, and besides, I liked the solitude of a long night drive. Or at least I thought I did. My name is Logan Price, 34, and I had no idea that night would change the way I looked at the open road forever. The highways outside Des Moines were empty, the kind of empty that makes the headlights seem like the only things alive. I was a little tired from the family meal, the warm food and long conversations still lingering in my stomach. My mind wandered between work deadlines and the mundane details of home life when I noticed a black van tailing me in the distance. At first I shrugged it off. Maybe another traveler, maybe a trucker. But then it didn't pass. As I adjusted my speed to merge onto a back road, the van mirrored every move. My stomach sank. "No way," I muttered under my breath. This isn't just coincidence." I called my wife, my voice tight, trembling more than I wanted to admit. "Hey, I think someone's following me," I said, gripping the wheel like it might save me. "Logan, don't panic. Can you pull somewhere safe?" she replied, her voice soft but concerned. I scanned the road, desperate for any light, any human presence. A lonely gas station appeared ahead. I swerved in, hoping they'd drive past. They didn't. The van slid behind me, silent at first, then the back doors began to open. 3 men in dark clothing stepped out. My heart leaped into my throat. Instincts took over. I dove into my car, locked the doors, and floored it. I could hear the thud of their hands against the handles as the van sped off just as suddenly as it had appeared. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. Later, the sheriff took my report politely but without much urgency. Over the next weeks, I learned that truckers and locals had spotted similar vans along lonely highways. My fear spiraled into paranoia. Every trip felt like a calculated risk. The highway that had once promised freedom now felt like a trap stretching for miles, and I realized this was only the beginning. For weeks, I avoided driving at night. Any route home from work, any late-night errand, became a psychological minefield. I doubled my vigilance on roads I'd driven 100 times before. Every rear-view glance sent my pulse racing. Every dark shadow near the roadside made me flinch. One night, 2 weeks after the initial encounter, I was driving back from a client meeting around 10 p.m. My tires crunched over frostbitten gravel when I saw it, the black van, waiting a mile behind me like a predator. My chest seized. I tried to call my wife, but my phone had no signal. Of course it didn't. "Okay," I whispered to myself, hands tight on the wheel. "Stay calm. Don't do anything stupid." I took an unexpected exit, weaving through narrow farm roads. The van followed, silent and deliberate. I could feel its presence in my mirror like dark eyes calculating, waiting. For the first time, I truly understood the sensation of being hunted. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but run where? These roads were desolate. There were no motels, no open diners, just miles of emptiness. I remembered the tire iron in the trunk, a laughable defense against whatever was waiting for me in that van. I considered running the vehicle off the road, but rationality overrode panic. If I caused an accident, I'd be alone, vulnerable, with no witnesses. Eventually, I found another gas station. It was small, only one pump working, and the lights flickered overhead. I pulled in praying the van would vanish, but it stayed. I sat in the car, engine running, pretending to make a phone call. Sweat ran down my back. After 15 minutes, the van finally disappeared, leaving nothing but a chilling emptiness in its wake. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were haunted by dark vans sliding through empty highways, doors creaking open, men in masks lunging toward me. I began carrying my phone in one hand and the tire iron in the other on all night drives, scanning the horizon like a soldier in a war zone. I started talking to truckers at rest stops, sharing what I'd experienced. One old man named Carl, his face lined with decades of highway miles, leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "Son, you're not the first and you won't be the last. They watch for lone drivers. They know the roads, know when the night is darkest. Some never get away." His words stuck with me. I began mapping my drives, noting every van sighting, every unmarked car. Patterns started to emerge. Empty roads, long stretches between towns, dark nights. They weren't random. Someone had trained them, had planned this. I also upgraded my security. Dash cam in the front and back, spare phone fully charged, and multiple escape routes memorized. But no amount of preparation could erase the fear lodged deep in my chest. One particularly frigid night, driving back from a late dinner, I saw the van again. This time I didn't panic. I slowed, turned on my hazard lights, and made a deliberate stop at a roadside diner. The van circled, paused, then drove past without incident. My body didn't relax. It was a calculated tease, a reminder that control was always in their hands. I realized the danger wasn't just physical, it was psychological. They were shaping my every move, eroding my confidence, my peace of mind. I felt watched even when I was home, the paranoia extending beyond the highways. By January, I was a different person. Nights alone were unbearable. The holidays had ended, but I still dreaded every dark highway. I had conversations with my wife about installing a GPS tracker, new locks, even a small alarm system at home. She worried about my mental state, which only made me more aware of how trapped I felt. Then one night, something changed. The van followed me for hours, almost to the point of exhaustion. They didn't make a move, didn't reveal their intent, just trailing, ghost-like. My hands cramped from gripping the wheel. I pulled into a truck stop, heart pounding, praying they would pass. When I looked in the mirror, I saw movement inside the van, silhouettes shifting, and then they were gone, evaporated into the night like smoke. The realization hit me. They were professionals. They weren't amateurs looking for theft or joyrides. They had precision, timing, and patience, and they knew I was terrified. Years later, I still drive cautiously at night. Every highway feels like a potential trap. Every shadow in my rearview mirror a possible threat. I never underestimate the danger again. I've learned to trust my instincts, to value preparation over bravado. I no longer see the open road as freedom. It's a test of vigilance, a reminder that danger can be unseen, calculated, and precise. And though the black van never returned after that one night, I feel its presence sometimes, a ghost riding with me, a memory of the fear that never fully left. The story isn't just about strangers on the highway. It's about respect for caution, awareness, and preparedness. Danger often hides in the familiar, and the most important defense is vigilance, calm thinking, and trusting your instincts. Freedom on the road comes with responsibility. Sometimes survival depends on the smallest decisions and the sharpest attention to detail. January 2015 had brought one of the worst snowstorms Burlington, Vermont had seen in years. I'm Lucas Hayes, 17 at the time, and my best friend, Ethan Cole, was 18. We were trying to make a few extra bucks shoveling sidewalks for neighbors, while the snow came down so thick it felt like the world had disappeared. Streetlights cast weak halos through the storm, barely cutting through the swirling white. "Man, this storm's insane," Ethan muttered, shaking snow off his boots as he adjusted his scarf. "Yeah," I replied, my teeth chattering. "But hey, we'll get paid." Our gloves were soaked, our jackets heavy with snow, but the extra cash was worth the freezing fingers. After clearing a few houses, we came to the old corner house on Maple Street. It looked abandoned, peeling paint, shutters crooked, snow clinging to the eaves, icicles hanging like jagged knives. "Over here, and boys," a deep, gravelly voice called from the doorway. We couldn't see the man. He stayed in the shadows. Ethan exchanged a nervous glance with me. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I muttered. There was something off about the way he spoke. Nervous, almost twitchy. We started shoveling the walkway, and I couldn't help but glance up at the second-floor window. Shadows moved behind the frosted glass. I nudged Ethan. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "Probably just shadows," he said, shrugging. But I could tell he didn't fully believe it. We finished the front walk, but the man didn't hand over payment. Instead, he muttered about damaged property and gestured toward the backyard. The snowdrifts were waist-deep, and the wind sliced through our jackets. Reluctantly, we followed him, shovels digging into the icy ground, feeling more exposed with every step. There was something in his twitching gestures that made my stomach tighten. When I claimed we'd forgotten a tool inside, I moved toward the gate, forcing my panic down. Snow muffled our hurried retreat, adrenaline pushing our legs faster. That night, when I got home, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Fresh boot prints leading from the backyard straight to our shed. They were too big, too heavy to belong to either of us. "Ethan." He was in my shed. I gasped, the fear catching in my throat. We called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, they asked questions, took notes, and examined the boot prints. The snowstorm had made the task more difficult, but even in the half-light, it was clear the homeowner had tried to sneak into our shed while we were distracted. Officer Jenkins, a gruff man in his 50s with decades on the force, shook his head. "He's heavily intoxicated, dangerous, and unpredictable. You boys were lucky he didn't confront you directly." I shivered at the thought. Ethan nodded, silent, staring down at the snow like it had turned into glass. The man was arrested later that week. According to the police report, he had a history of aggressive behavior, especially when drinking. The thought that he had been watching us from his window, planning his move while we shoveled snow in the storm, made my skin crawl. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment I saw movement in that dark window. Every time the wind rattled my window, my heart jumped. Even walking down Maple Street during daylight hours felt risky. Ethan and I replayed the event over and over, the voice echoing in the blizzard, the dark window, the feeling of being hunted. It was burned into my memory. "I can't believe we were that close to... I don't even want to think about it," Ethan said one afternoon, pulling his coat tighter. "Yeah," I replied. "Feels like it wasn't just a bad day. It was survival." After the arrest, life slowly returned to normal on the surface, but the memory lingered. Every snowstorm, even minor flurries, made my stomach knot. I checked locks obsessively, and any shadow outside my bedroom window triggered a jolt of fear. Ethan and I tried to joke about it, laugh it off, but the tension never fully disappeared. Walking down Maple Street felt different, like the wind carried unseen eyes. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, hearing footsteps that weren't there. I realized the storm had given him an advantage. He had used the weather, the isolation, to plan, to move without fear of being seen. That kind of calculated threat was terrifying. Not random, not impulsive. It was intentional. Even the neighbors, usually friendly and chatty, seemed wary during storms. Everyone had heard rumors about the man, about his temper and unpredictable behavior, but no one could fully explain the feeling of dread that settled in the neighborhood that winter. One night I couldn't sleep. I walked outside, flashlight in hand, just to reassure myself. The snow glowed pale in the beam, the wind quiet except for a few flurries. I checked every corner, every shed, every shadow, and felt slightly safer, but I knew it wouldn't last. Some fear doesn't fade. It waits for the next storm. Weeks passed, and life started to settle back into routine. Ethan and I continued shoveling, but we avoided the older, darker houses. We stuck to houses with lights on, neighbors we trusted, streets with traffic. I thought the worst was over until a minor snowstorm hit in February. As we trudged along a well-lit street, I glanced at a second-floor window of a house we hadn't worked on before. Shadows moved inside, and my heart jumped. I realized it wasn't just that man. It was the vulnerability itself. Shoveling snow, working outside, being exposed in the storm, anyone could take advantage. We completed our route quickly that day, adrenaline fueling our steps. That night, we sat in my living room, hands warming over mugs of cocoa, speaking in hushed voices. "Feels like we learned a lesson the hard way," Ethan said quietly. "Yeah," I agreed. Sometimes even something as normal as shoveling snow can turn into a fight for survival. It was a lesson we didn't want to learn, but we had. And the fear that gripped us back then was something I would carry for years. By spring, the snow melted, and with it, some of the immediate tension. The man was gone from the neighborhood, confined by legal consequences, and Maple Street started to feel like a safe place again. But my perspective had changed. I no longer took ordinary tasks for granted. I always checked windows before going outside. I never ignored the feeling of unease. And I realized that awareness and caution weren't paranoia, they were survival instincts. Ethan and I continued to work together side by side, but the memory of that storm, the dark windows, and the voice calling from the shadows stayed with us. I never walked down that street alone in snow again without checking every detail. The snowstorm had taught me something important. The world isn't always as safe as it seems, and danger often hides in the most familiar places. Even routine tasks can carry unexpected risks. Awareness, caution, and trusting your instincts are crucial in keeping yourself safe. Fear can teach preparation, vigilance, and respect for the unseen dangers in everyday life. Sometimes, survival depends on paying attention to what others overlook. It was October 2018, and the early autumn chill had started creeping into Rochester, New York. My name is Maya Thornton, I'm 26, and I work as a physical therapist at a small outpatient clinic in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Most days the clinic closes around 6 p.m., but I often stay later to catch up on administrative work, input patient notes, or schedule private sessions. My coworkers always tease me for being a night owl at a physical therapy clinic, but for me, those late hours are peaceful. The empty rooms, the echoing hallway, it's quiet, efficient, and I can focus without distractions. It was on one of these late evenings around 7:30 p.m. that I first noticed him, James Harlow. He was standing near the reception, arms crossed, casually leaning against the counter. At first glance, he seemed harmless, clean-cut, polite, smiling in that friendly, professional way. He caught my eye as I walked past with a patient's chart. "Can I help you?" I asked politely. "Yes." "I was hoping to see you, Maya," he said. His smile was calm, but something about the way he said my name made my skin prickle. Over the next few weeks, he began booking sessions exclusively with me. He would compliment my work, ask casual questions about my life, and occasionally linger after the session ended. At first, I brushed it off. Some patients just appreciate consistency. But I began noticing little things. He would lean closer than necessary, ask about where I lived, and sometimes he'd appear early before anyone else was in the clinic. "James, the exercises work best if you follow the program, not just me," I said one day during a session, forcing a smile. "I know, Maya, but I like it when it's you," he replied, leaning a little too close. I laughed nervously, adjusting my clipboard. That moment lingered in my mind longer than it should have. I didn't want to seem rude or scare him off, but I started to feel uneasy, a creeping sense of tension I couldn't shake. By the end of that month, I noticed him waiting in the parking lot after sessions. Sometimes he would walk to his car behind me, pretending it was coincidence. Other times, I'd see his car idling across the street when I left the clinic. My heart began racing every time I heard footsteps behind me. One evening, I confided in my coworker and friend, Rachel. "Rachel, it's getting worse. He knows when I'm alone. I feel watched." Rachel frowned, glancing around the empty clinic. "We should call security or the cops. This isn't normal." The weeks that followed were a steady gnawing escalation. James left small notes on my car windshield. "Hope you had a good day, Maya," or "thinking about you." Sometimes there were tiny gifts, a coffee cup, a single flower. I knew it wasn't harmless attention, it was invasive, and it left me rattled. I tried to maintain professional boundaries, keeping interactions strictly within therapy sessions. But each encounter felt like stepping into a minefield. His compliments became more personal, his tone sharper. When he asked about my social life or my apartment, I began deflecting, redirecting conversation to exercises or therapy techniques. One night, after finishing notes around 9:30 p.m., I walked out to the parking lot and froze. James was there, leaning against a lamppost. "James, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to make sure you got home safe," he said, smiling. But there was a cold edge to his tone. I felt my stomach twist. That night I couldn't shake the fear. I called Rachel as soon as I got home. He was in the parking lot, watching. I can't ignore this anymore. "We're going to call the police tomorrow," she said firmly. "This isn't just infatuation, it's stalking." By November, things had escalated beyond clinic visits. Notes appeared on my car without explanation. Small gifts were left on my doorstep. Every evening, I checked locks, peered through windows, and triple-checked my schedule. I installed a simple security app that let me monitor the front door, but the paranoia stayed. One night I was home alone, preparing for bed. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. A soft knock echoed at the door. "Maya," whispered a voice. My blood ran cold. I hadn't given anyone keys. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver, "Someone, they're outside. Please, send help." The dispatcher's calm voice guided me. "Stay inside. Lock all doors and do not engage." Through the peephole, I saw him crouched by my apartment window, peering in. The minutes stretched into eternity until I heard sirens. When the police arrived, James fled before they could catch him. I sat on the couch afterward, trembling, trying to steady my breath. My apartment, once a place of refuge, felt violated, unsafe. I realized professional boundaries weren't enough. No matter how polite or cautious I was, his obsession had escalated beyond reason. The aftermath left me hyper-vigilant. I installed security cameras, upgraded locks, and avoided evening sessions whenever possible. Even casual errands became triggers. At the grocery store, I would flinch when strangers walked behind me. At the gym, I felt eyes on me when no one was around. Rachel became my anchor. "You did everything right," she said. "You reported him. You protected yourself. Now it's about reclaiming your space." But reclaiming it wasn't easy. Every shadow, every unexpected sound triggered panic. Even months later, I would feel a presence behind me in the parking lot, heart racing as if the past were replaying. One day the police called. James had been following multiple women in town. I wasn't the only target. He had been escalating slowly, waiting for the right moment to confront someone alone. I felt a mix of relief and anger. My fear had been justified. Eventually, I returned to a semblance of normalcy. The cameras and locks gave me some peace, but I never stopped trusting my instincts. I continued working as a physical therapist, but I avoided night shifts and always stayed alert. I learned to prioritize safety over convenience. Every time I hear footsteps behind me or see a shadow in a parking lot, my chest tightens. But now, I recognize it as vigilance, not paranoia. I've accepted that some people will not respect boundaries, and that awareness and preparation are the only shields against them. Even in spaces I once trusted, danger can appear quietly. And sometimes the most ordinary routines, a late shift, a walk to your car, returning home, can be disrupted by those who patiently wait for the right moment. Safety is not guaranteed by professionalism or trust in routine. Obsession and predatory behavior can escalate quietly, turning familiar everyday spaces into threats. Awareness, vigilance, and proactive measures are essential. Trust your instincts, prioritize personal security, And never underestimate the patience of someone determined to cross boundaries. I still remember the exact day I moved into my new apartment in Minneapolis. It was spring of 2020, the city buzzing with the muted energy of early pandemic life. I had just turned 23, freshly independent, and eager to start my adult life on my own terms. My parents had been supportive but worried, my mom especially, but I insisted that I could handle it. I wasn't reckless. I was just ready. The apartment complex was older but clean, with red brick walls and wrought iron balconies. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and the mailboxes were neatly lined up along the far wall. I lugged my last box inside, Finn, my golden retriever, trotting behind me, excited for the new surroundings. He was my constant companion, and I felt safer knowing he was with me. Settling in was easier than I expected. The apartment had high ceilings, wide windows, and cheap rent that made me suspicious at first, but I brushed it off. I spent the first few days unpacking, arranging my furniture, and walking Finn around the neighborhood. Everything seemed normal, or at least that's what I told myself. But then I started noticing him. I first saw him in the courtyard late one afternoon. He was a man in a dark hoodie, standing near a cluster of bushes at the far end. At first, I thought he might live in the complex, maybe a delivery person or a maintenance worker. But there was something off. He wasn't moving the way someone who had a purpose would. He just stood there watching. And the moment I glanced in his direction, he vanished. Harper, you're imagining things. Jade, my roommate from college who had stayed over briefly, teased one night as I paced by the window. Probably just some guy who lives here. I don't think so, I said, my voice tight. I caught Finn whimpering softly at my feet. He's always there, watching me. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Even when I walked Finn along the sidewalk or went to pick up groceries, I imagined him lurking at the edges of my vision. It started with small things. A snack wrapper left near my door, footprints in the garden that weren't Finn's or mine, scratch marks on my mailbox. Each detail chipped away at my sense of safety. One weekend my mom visited. She noticed my tension immediately. "Mom, I think someone's stalking me," I confessed as we sat in the living room, Finn curled at our feet. "Look, he's in the courtyard again." Her eyes widened as she leaned toward the window. "Stay inside. Don't go outside alone. Let me handle it," she said firmly. I nodded, feeling both relieved and helpless. The sense of unease grew daily. I started checking the locks multiple times before bed, making sure windows were shut tight. Every shadow became suspect. I found myself counting steps when walking Finn and retracing my path to check for footprints. Even the simple act of getting the mail made my heart pound, because I never knew if he was waiting. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he was homeless. Maybe he was another tenant who had a weird hobby of people watching. But rational thoughts felt distant and hollow compared to the creeping dread that I was being watched constantly. That's the thing about fear. It grows silently until it infiltrates every part of your life. Until even the safety of your own home feels like a trap. It wasn't yet terrifying, not fully. It was a quiet, gnawing anxiety that made me jump at sounds, double-check locks, and flinch when someone walked past the window. But the escalation, I didn't know it yet, was just beginning. By the second week, I couldn't ignore it any longer. He had begun to follow patterns, making his presence more deliberate. One evening, as Finn and I returned from a walk, I saw him perched on the staircase landing near my apartment. He froze when he noticed me looking, but the intensity of his stare was enough to send chills down my spine. Jade wasn't around this time. I felt a surge of panic. I gripped Finn's leash tighter, refusing to look away until we reached our door. Once inside, I locked both the deadbolt and chain, my hands shaking. Finn barked nervously, sensing my fear. Over the next few days, the signs multiplied. Footprints in the garden appeared closer to my door. A snack wrapper, seemingly discarded hours before, lay on the porch. Small scratches appeared on the wood of my mailbox and the railings of the staircase. It was like he was leaving markers to remind me he was there. I called my mom one night, voice low and urgent. "He's getting bolder. I can't even go out for a walk without feeling like he's there." "Harper, you have to take this seriously," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you're tough, but you can't handle this alone. Don't go out. Let me come over. Lock yourself in your apartment." That evening, my routine had completely shifted. I stopped walking Finn at sunset. I carried pepper spray and double-checked that all doors and windows were secure. I started leaving lights on even during the day, hoping it would make my apartment less appealing to watch. One afternoon, everything escalated. My mom was visiting, and we were sipping tea near the large window that overlooked the courtyard. Suddenly, she gasped. I followed her gaze and froze. The man was crouched in a tree staring at us directly. He had clearly been hiding there for hours, watching our every move. I felt my stomach drop. "Call 911, I shouted, fumbling with my phone. My mom barricaded the doors, and Finn growled low in his throat. By the time the police arrived, he had vanished. There was no trace except broken branches and the clear evidence that someone had been obsessively stalking us. The officers explained that stalkers often watch their targets without making contact, sometimes for days, sometimes weeks. "He could come back," one of them warned, his voice grave. "You need to take precautions." That night, I barely slept. Every noise, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of wind in the trees, felt like him moving closer. My apartment, which had once been my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Life after the incident became a careful negotiation with fear. I installed security cameras, motion sensors, and reinforced locks. I avoided evening walks, altered my commuting routes, and carried pepper spray wherever I went. Even mundane activities felt charged with anxiety. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision triggered a jolt of panic. Work became challenging. Sitting in meetings, my mind drifted constantly to the thought of him watching, waiting. The familiar office felt safer than home, ironically. I started leaving the lights on at night, even during the day. I wouldn't open windows, wouldn't let myself relax. Finn seemed confused by my tension, pacing nervously as I flitted from one precaution to the next. Jade tried to reassure me. "Harper, you can't live like this forever. He can't control your whole life," she said one afternoon, when I snapped at her for suggesting we go outside. "I know," I whispered, but I didn't know. My sense of normalcy had been shattered. The apartment that had once felt comforting now seemed like a place of vulnerability. I had become hyper-aware of the man's patterns. How long could he be watching? How did he choose his targets? Every noise made me flinch. Every passerby on the street seemed suspicious. Even simple chores like taking out the trash became exercises in paranoia. I'd wait until I was sure no one was around, then dart outside quickly, Finn's leash in hand. Once I thought I saw a shadow flit past the courtyard. My heart leapt, my breath caught in my chest. But it was only a neighbor returning from work. Even so, the moment reminded me that fear didn't need a presence. It only needed the possibility of one. Weeks passed, and slowly I began to piece things together. Harper Ellis, the person I had been a month earlier, was gone. In her place was someone acutely aware of vulnerability, of the delicate balance between perception and reality. I started researching similar incidents in other complexes across the city. I found stories online, women reporting glimpses of a man lurking, unexplained footprints, discarded objects near doors. It became clear, he wasn't random. He had a pattern, monitoring multiple women, studying routines, choosing targets carefully. The realization was chilling. I hadn't been imagining things. My fear wasn't paranoia, it was survival instinct. I doubled my precautions, but I also learned subtle ways to regain control. I documented everything, recorded video, and kept friends and family in the loop. I couldn't erase what had happened, but I could fortify myself, reclaim a small measure of safety. Months later, life returned to something resembling normal. I still flinched at shadows and noises, but I had learned to separate instinct from terror. I walked Finn again, though cautiously, and I reconnected with friends in person for the first time in weeks. Yet, the lesson lingered. Some predators don't need to make contact to control and terrorize. Fear itself is a powerful tool. My apartment would never feel entirely the same, my routines forever altered, but I had survived. I had learned to assert boundaries, to trust instincts, and to recognize danger before it became physical. I kept the cameras, the locks, and the awareness. Not because I wanted to live in fear, but because I refused to let fear dictate my life. The world was bigger than my anxiety, and I would navigate it on my terms. Safety isn't just physical, it's mental and emotional. Awareness, precaution, and trusting your instincts are crucial. Some threats aren't immediate or visible, but preparation and vigilance empower us to reclaim our lives from fear. True courage isn't fearlessness, it's living despite the fear. I remember that October of 1986 like it was yesterday. Rochester Hills was quiet that month, the kind of suburb where every street seemed familiar and safe, and neighbors waved from their porches as they tended to gardens or brought in the mail. I was 24, freshly graduated, working a standard office job, and running had become my sanctuary. Those evening jogs weren't just exercise, they were therapy, a way to shake off the stress of fluorescent lights, spreadsheets, and constant phone calls. My dad, naturally protective, never failed to remind me of the dangers that lurked after dark. "Laura, don't run after dark alone. You never know who's out there," he would say, his voice a mix of concern and authority. "I'll be fine, Dad," I'd reply, tying my shoelaces as tight as I liked them. "I know the streets. I've run them hundreds of times. It's just me and Finn. Oh wait, Finn's at home today. Just me in the night." Those nights were perfect at first. The air smelled faintly of fall leaves and damp pavement. Streetlights cast long shadows over the sidewalks, creating that comforting illusion of isolation without danger. I ran the same routes, taking the familiar turns through quiet blocks, feeling strong and independent. But then, one evening, I noticed the headlights. At first, I dismissed it. A car passing by, maybe a neighbor. But as I continued, I realized it was following me. Not speeding, just gliding along the street at the same pace. I slowed slightly, trying to see inside. The driver was hidden behind the dim glare, a dark hoodie or hat casting shadows over their face. My chest tightened. "Probably nothing," I whispered to myself, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I picked up my pace, turning corners, taking detours. Still, the car seemed to follow, silently, steadily. I ducked behind a row of bushes, heart hammering, hoping it would pass. It didn't. Only after several minutes did it finally move on, but the unease stayed with me, clinging to my muscles like tension I couldn't shake. The next day I tried to rationalize the incident. Maybe it really was a neighbor, maybe just coincidence. I told my dad about it that night, keeping my voice low. "Dad, I think someone's following me on my runs," I said cautiously. His brow furrowed, concern sharp in his eyes. "Stay inside. I'll come with you next time. You're not going out alone." I nodded, but the thought of being accompanied made me feel stifled. Running had always been my independence, my freedom. I didn't want it to feel like a chore or a safety drill. But that night, the uneasy feeling didn't leave me. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow flickering past my window made me flinch. I realized that something had shifted. I was no longer running for pleasure. I was running from possibility. Over the next few weeks, I tried to ignore the signs. I ran in daylight when I could, stayed on busier streets, and tried to convince myself the dark hoodie man was an occasional coincidence. But he returned repeatedly, on the same streets, at roughly the same times I went for evening runs. It was always subtle at first. A car moving slowly behind me, an engine muted, headlights dim. I noticed his pattern, the way he would circle blocks, vanish, and then reappear as though he had never left. I began confiding in my dad more frequently, his protective instincts clashing with my need for independence. "Dad, he's back," I said one evening, voice tight, fingers trembling around my water bottle. "Same car, same streets. I swear he's watching me." He frowned deeply. "Laura, we need to report this. Don't run alone, not anymore. This is serious." I hated the fear creeping into my daily routine. I hated losing the freedom I had always taken for granted. But the anxiety wasn't just in my mind, it manifested physically. I jumped at sudden noises, flinched when headlights glinted off windows, and counted steps obsessively during my runs. One night, after a particularly long day at the office, I came home and froze. There he was, parked directly outside my apartment window, engine running, lights off, crouched in the shadows as if he had been waiting for hours. My heart pounded. I dialed my dad, whispering frantically, "Dad, he's here," at my window. Without hesitation, he bolted out of the house, confronting the man directly. The stalker sped off immediately, tires screeching on the asphalt, but the terror he left behind lingered. Weeks later, news reports confirmed my worst fears. Women in the area had been targeted, some fatally. He was meticulous, patient, and dangerous. In the weeks following, my life became a careful negotiation with fear. I installed security locks on every door, purchased a personal alarm, and refused to jog after sunset. Every routine, once ordinary, became a mental checklist of precautions. Check the car outside before leaving, glance over my shoulder frequently, avoid empty streets, and never assume safety. Work became a struggle. Meetings blurred as my mind focused on shadows, reflections, and the distant hum of engines on my street. I stopped answering my phone in the evenings. Even visiting the grocery store alone became a calculated risk. My independence, my freedom, had been replaced by vigilance. And yet, I refused to let fear consume me entirely. I continued running, but in daylight hours, in busier streets, often with a friend or family member. I kept logs of every unusual occurrence, every vehicle, every stranger lingering too long. The pattern, I realized, was key. Knowledge was a form of power, an attempt to reclaim control from someone who had stolen it from me. It didn't take long for the pieces to connect. Researching incidents in Rochester Hills and nearby suburbs revealed a disturbing trend. The stalker was not random. He studied his victims meticulously, observing routines, learning habits, waiting for the right moment. He didn't need to strike to instill fear. Merely his presence, the threat of his observation, was enough. I realized that survival wasn't just about outrunning him. It was about awareness, adaptation, and refusing to return to the same vulnerability. Every precaution, every moment of vigilance, was part of reclaiming the life he had threatened to take from me. I documented everything, shared the information with local authorities, and became more mindful of safety in every aspect of my life. I was still Laura Whitman, the runner, the young professional, but a Laura who had learned the cost of complacency. Years later, the fear has faded but never entirely disappeared. I still check over my shoulder on quiet streets at night. I still notice the reflection of headlights with a jolt of tension. But I've also learned resilience. Survival isn't just physical, it's mental. The stalker may have left my life, but he changed it irrevocably. I've rebuilt routines, established boundaries, and learned to assert control over my environment. I run now, but I do so with awareness, confidence, and a respect for the fragility of safety. Freedom is never guaranteed, but preparation, vigilance, and understanding of potential danger make independence possible. True safety is not merely about escaping danger. It's about cultivating awareness, asserting boundaries, and adapting without surrendering one's independence. Threats may come in unseen forms, but vigilance, resilience, and informed action empower individuals to reclaim control over their lives. Fear may leave its mark, but it need not define us.